Welcome to the infamous edition of the Headstones and Microphones, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched, first-person simulation done through creative storytelling of history's most infamous people. Now, let's meet our guest. Welcome to the podcast. Let's start at the absolute beginning, where the public narrative hasn't yet distorted who you were. When and where were you born, and what was your given name?
Hi, Calvin. I was born on August 10th, 1907, in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. My parents named me Alvin Francis Karpis, though depending on who was writing the records down, it was sometimes spelled Karpovits or Karpovits. I came from Lithuanian roots, long before the American papers started printing my name in bold letters.
What was your hometown and home life like as a child?
My family moved around a bit when I was a toddler, spending time in London and Grand Rapids, but we finally settled down in Topeka, Kansas, which became my real hometown. My father, Jonas, worked as a farmer and a painter for the Santa Fe Railroad, and my mother, Ona, took care of the house. I grew up with three sisters, Mihalyn, Emily, and Clara. Honestly, I came from a good, hard-working family, but our neighborhood was right near the railroad tracks, and I found myself drawn to the rougher edge of town rather than a quiet home life.
Was there a story behind your name or a nickname that stuck with you?
The transition from Alvin to Alvin Karpis actually started because of an elementary school teacher who changed it because my given name was too difficult for her to pronounce. But the nickname the world came to know me by was Creepy Karpis. The guys in the underworld started calling me that because of my quiet demeanor and a piercing, sinister smile that apparently made people uncomfortable. J. Edgar Hoover and the feds, though, had a different title for me. They labeled me Public Enemy Number 1.
What were you like as a child, and how many years of schooling did you actually attend?
I was a mediocre student at best. Not particularly good, but not completely terrible either. My teachers at the Banner School in Topeka remembered that I excelled in only one real line. I was the best marble shooter in the whole school. But I started drifting into mischief by the time I was 10, running errands for local gamblers, bootleggers, and pimps around the neighborhood. I didn't stay in the classroom for very many years. My formal schooling completely ended during my early teens because the education I was getting on the streets was far more lucrative.
What's a decision that changed everything for you but felt small at the time?
When I was 10 years old, an 18-year-old kid named Arthur Witchy moved into our neighborhood straight out of a reformatory. To me, he looked like a total big shot. One afternoon, he asked me to break into a local grocery store with him, and I didn't give it a second thought because it seemed so simple. That one little break-in felt like a minor neighborhood prank at the time, but it completely broke the ice and initiated my lifelong career in crime.
Let's talk about your early run-ins with the law. Before the world knew your name for your most infamous actions, what was your very first arrest or interaction with law enforcement, and what were the consequences?
A lot of people think my first arrest was for a burglary, but it actually had to do with my childhood fascination with trains. In 1925, when I was 17, I got caught riding the roof of the Pan American Express train down in Florida. The authorities didn't take kindly to a young drifter, and the consequence was a stiff 30-day stretch working on a brutal Florida chain gang. Not long after I got back to Kansas, I was caught in the middle of a routine warehouse job and received a 10-year sentence at the Kansas State Reformatory in Hutchinson.
At what moment did you realize your name would never be forgotten?
It was in the early 1930s when Fred Barker and I teamed up to form the Barker Karpis gang. After escaping the reformatory and eventually meeting Fred in Lansing prison, we went on a massive, coordinated rampage of bank robberies across the Midwest. But the moment that truly put us on the national map was when we graduated from banks to high-profile kidnappings, taking a wealthy brewer named William Ham Jr. and a banker named Edward Bremer. When J. Edgar Hoover personally took over the case and the national media started screaming about the Barker Karpis gang on every front page, I knew my name was permanently etched into history.
Did fame make you more dangerous, or did it simply expose who you already were?
The fame didn't alter our methods, but the stiff sentences we faced completely hardened our resolve to never be taken alive. When I was sent to the reformatory, I wrote in my autobiography that I recognized it as an opportunity to begin my education in big-time crime. The notoriety didn't make us dangerous, but the massive dragnet forced us to become incredibly meticulous, heavily armed, and completely ruthless to protect our freedom and our scores.
Who do you believe betrayed you first? A person, society, or your own instincts?
I was ultimately betrayed by the intense, high-tech pressure of the federal investigation and the people in our network who couldn't hold up under scrutiny. The feds captured Doc Barker in January of 1935, and while searching his apartment, they discovered a hand-drawn map detailing exactly where Ma and Fred Barker were hiding out in Florida, leading to their deaths in a massive gun battle. Once our inner circle was smashed and my associates began talking to save their own skins, my own luck began to rapidly run out.
What was your most unique habit or a random fact about you that would surprise people?
Something that always surprises people is just how long I managed to survive inside the federal prison system compared to the other public enemies of my era. While guys like John Dillinger, Pretty Boy Floyd, and Babyface Nelson were shot down in a matter of months, I was captured alive and ended up serving 34 years in prison. In fact, I served more time at Alcatraz than any other inmate in history, spending 26 years on the Rock.
What did the public never understand about the pressure you were under at the time?
The public loved the thrill of the gangster stories, but they never understood the absolute exhausting pressure of being the last public enemy standing. By 1936, my face was on every post office wall, and Hoover was desperate to catch me to secure his own reputation. I was moving constantly, hiding out in places like New Orleans, knowing that every single detective in the United States was authorized to shoot me on sight to claim the glory.
Did you have any known rivalries that defined your career?
My ultimate defining rivalry was directly against J. Edgar Hoover himself. He had been criticized by Congress for not personally making arrests, so he made it his personal mission to bring me in. It became a bitter, high-stakes duel between my ability to slip through his fingers and his absolute desperation to use my capture to catapult the FBI into the public eye.
What personal battles were you fighting privately while the world was watching?
Privately, I was fighting the total destruction of the only family structure I had left. Watching Ma and Fred get wiped out in Florida and seeing Doc locked away left me completely isolated. I was running on pure survival instinct, trying to manage a string of safe houses and double lives while battling the internal realization that the old gang was entirely gone.
What was your darkest moment, and was there ever a time you wanted to walk away from it all?
The darkest moment was May 1st, 1936, on Canal Street in New Orleans. A dozen or so federal agents swarmed over my Plymouth coupe, completely trapping me. Facing the reality that my run was permanently over and that the freedom I had fought for since I was a teenager was entirely gone was an absolute abyss. I knew right then there was no walking away.
What truth was hardest to escape when you were alone at night?
The hardest truth to escape was that for all our meticulous planning and the millions we stole, the house always wins in the end. Alone at night in my cell at Alcatraz, listening to the foghorns, I had to face the reality that my entire youth and adult life were going to be consumed by stone walls, all because I chose to follow an 18-year-old kid into a grocery store when I was 10.
When the law finally closed in, how exactly were you brought to justice? Walk me through the final arrest, the charges that ultimately stuck, and the legal outcome of your trials.
When the feds swarmed my car in New Orleans, Hoover himself announced I was under arrest. In a funny twist of administrative incompetence, not a single agent had brought handcuffs, so they had to tie my hands securely using an agent's necktie. I was brought to trial on federal kidnapping charges for the Ham and Bremer cases. I pleaded guilty to avoid the gallows, and the court handed me a life sentence, which I served out across Leavenworth, Alcatraz, and McNeil Island.
What's the craziest rumor ever told about you, and what part of your story has been exaggerated the most?
The official FBI version of my arrest is the biggest exaggeration out there. Hoover claimed he bravely reached right into my car and grabbed me before I could reach a rifle in the back seat. The hilarious truth is that my Plymouth coupe didn't even have a back seat. And Hoover only came out from around the corner after his agents had already seized me and called out that it was entirely safe to approach. They completely manufactured a heroic tale to build up his legend.
What is the biggest misconception people have about your life?
The biggest misconception is the myth that Ma Barker was this criminal mastermind who planned all our bank jobs and led us with an iron fist. The media and Hoover built that up to justify the Fed shooting an old woman in Florida. In reality, Ma didn't know a thing about planning robberies. She was just an old country mother who badgered parole boards and wardens to try and get her boys out of trouble.
What would surprise people most about your ordinary human side?
It would surprise people to know that after I finally won my parole in 1969 and got deported back to Canada, I lived a completely quiet, ordinary life. I actually wrote 2 successful books about my experiences, moved out to Spain to enjoy the warm weather, and spent my final decade relaxing, entirely detached from the violent world of the 1930s.
When, where, and how did you pass away?
I passed away on August 26, 1979, in Torremolinos, Spain. I was 72 years old, and my death was officially ruled to be from natural causes, though there was a bit of local talk because sleeping pills were found near my bed.
Was your downfall caused more by your own flaws or by the world changing around you?
The world changed completely around us, Calvin. When we started, local cops couldn't cross county lines and didn't even have radios. But J. Edgar Hoover built a centralized, modern federal machine with fingerprint files, laboratory analysis, and nationwide coordination. A loose gang of bank robbers simply couldn't compete once the entire country organized its laws and technology to hunt us down.
Do you have any closing remarks about the interview or the stories you shared that you would like to share with the listeners before signing off?
I would just tell the listeners that the fast cash and the reputation look big in the history books, but spending 26 years of your life on a rock in the middle of San Francisco Bay is a terrible trade. Use your head for something honest. Thank you for the talk, Calvin.
And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast. Remember, do better with the life you have been given and choose to do good in this life. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.